Okay, so thank you for attending the conference. It's an honor to be here. I'm going to talk about intersectional representation of Arab legislators in the Israeli parliament. It's the first decade. The paper is about the first decade. It's part of a larger project, and the larger project is about all the time, since the establishment of Israel until now, 2021, and I have a very exciting findings, but now I'm going to share just the first 10 years. My name is Osnat Akirav, and I'm from the Western Galilee College, Israel. Okay, so one slide about theory, but we all actually know about the theory of representation since this is our expertise. So scholars about minority representation found that mainly minority legislators respond to their minority voters, but then they ask what happened when minority legislator has more than one identity, such as race, gender, class, sexual orientation, and more. What happened to his representation? And this is where the intersectional representation phrase emerge. Previous scholars argue that when legislators have legislators with multiple identities, they actually experience something like intersectional invisibility. This is why my paper asks two questions. The first one is whether, when, or why intersectional identities create invisible representation, because I'm not sure that it actually happens in my case. And the second one, especially about the Israeli Arab minority legislators, what happened to them? What should we expect from their representation? Which identity is more significant? The Arab nationality, the Palestinian nationality, their gender, and more. So with regard to the theoretical framework, I looked at previous studies, and most of them looked at gender, mainly female, and additional one identity, such as race and ethnicity, or gender with race or ethnicity and religion, but religion mostly Muslims. And the third group is again about gender, female, and religious, again, mainly Muslims. My theoretical framework suggests first to look at the very unique context of Israel as a Jewish and a democratic state, and then combine four identities for each legislator. The first one is gender, but not just female, female and male in a very traditional society. And then religion, not just Muslims, we have Christians and Druze, and two nationalities. The first one is Arab nationality, which is part of the Arab world. And the second is the Palestinian nationality, which is part of the Palestinian people. So what actually happened in the Israeli parliament with so many identity for very specific and unique minority? In order to understand what is the content that I analyze, it is about a discourse analysis, meaning I looked at all the talks on the floor, and by talks, I mean parliamentary questions, private member bills and legislation, motion for the agenda, 1-minute speeches, and debates during a vote of no confidence, another debate regarding special events. In sum, I can say that all the talks that took place on the floor, I analyzed them without distinguish between the different parliamentary tools. It's important to say because most of the previous studies concentrated on one parliamentary tool and looked at the intersectional representation, but I tried to capture the whole discourse. So previous studies used qualitative and quantitative approach. In the bigger project, I use qualitative and quantitative approach. In this paper, I used topic modeling procedure to analyze the content, to analyze the discourse. These procedures allows us to sort text when categories are unknown. And from my point of view, it's even more important because then I can analyze the content unbiased, because I'm familiar with the Israeli politics, with the Arab legislators, and it was important to look at their at the content of their speeches unbiased. This is why I use the top modeling procedures with some of our previous colleagues, previous studies say that it's not good enough to use these kind of procedures, but this is my explanation why I use it for my research. And then I develop an intersectional representation index. Within the index, there are 5 themes. 4 are the identities, the intersectional identities. Nationalities is Arab, religion as Muslims, Christians, Druze, another nationality as Palestinian, and gender, female and male. When I have speeches without something specific about these 4 identities, I call them others, meaning they spoke about it when they reply to other initiation of their colleagues during budget debate or vote of no confidence. This is why it's others, and I try to distinguish as much as possible between the other 4 identities. And the calculation is the 100% for each legislator talk on the floor, and the proportion of the 5 themes. This is the intersectional representation index. Just one slide about the history of Israel, the context of Israel, the first decade. We had 3 Knesset terms, 8 governments, and 2 prime ministers. And you can see the picture of the establisher of Israel, David Ben-Gurion. And during that time, we had a massive wave of immigration, switching the numbers of Jewish compared to the Arab. The Arab became even more minority than they were before. Before the establishment of Israel, they were majority, and Arab citizens in Israel lived under military rule until 1966. And this is a picture of 2 leaders, one from the right, one from the left, that opposed the military rule. And since then, until now, we had terrorist attacks. At that time, it was Fedayun, now it's Hamas and Hezbollah and all the other guys. And in 1956, we had Operation Kadesh, when Israel conquered Sinai, and after 8 months, we went back to the border. So this is Israel in the first decade. And the next slide is a little bit about the Arab legislators at the first decade. And as you can see, 12% of the Israeli population are Arab. And in 1960, 11, because of the immigration of the Jewish, and 88 or 89% are Jewish. When we see their numbers in the Knesset, we can see that they are minority. They are underrepresented. But when we look at their religion, we can see that 70% are Muslims, 21% Christians, and 9% Druze. We can see that Muslims during the old time are underrepresented, but Christians, as you can see, and Druze are overrepresented, by the way, until now. There are more Druze and Christians legislators in the Knesset compared to their share in the Israeli population. In the first decade, all are men. And very interesting point is to look at the opposition and coalition. Most of people said the first time when Arab came to the coalition is in this government, in the current government, but it's not true. As you can see, most of them are part of the coalition, while just few in the opposition. And there are satellite parties, which are party next by Jewish party. Like the Jewish party is the mother and the Arab party is the satellite to the mother, or the moon or earth or whatever. And there were independent parties, Arab independent parties. So this is the descriptive representation of Arab minorities. So let's see how the Intersectional Representation Index present the picture. And I just would like to see how, okay, I have less than 1 minute, right? So 3 members in the first Knesset, and as you can see, the light blue is Arab nationality, while the yellow is Palestinian nationality. So the Palestinian nationality gained less attention, while the Arab nationality gained more, while the orange is religion and the green is gender. Let's look at the next Knesset term. There are much more Arab legislators, and here you can see that 3 actually members invest more time at the Palestinian issues. You can see here, here, and here, while the other invest less time at the Palestinian issues, while I have to say that 2 of them are Druze, which are not part of the Palestinian people. They are part of the Arab people. And the third Knesset, we can see the same trend. Again, Druze legislator that invest a lot of time compared to his colleagues to the Palestinian nationality, while all the others that are Muslims, that are Palestinian, invest less time at the Palestinian issue. There is much more to say, but just the 2 last slides. First, we can see that intersectional representation exists. Second, we see that within the different legislatures, they are varied in the way they invest time in their identity. And the third one is that other identities indeed gained less attention, but I don't say that they disappear, as previous colleagues said before. The last slide is about this current Knesset. As you can see, there are women, some of them actually religious, not enough women, of course. Most of them are in Arab party, most of them in the coalition. Thank you for listening, and that's it for now.